Hi, good evening. Welcome to Reconstruct's webinar on what to know before setting up children's service. We are going to be talking about residential homes today, supported accommodation and education settings. So welcome. Just to give a bit of an introduction, my name is Priya. I'm the Head of Quality and Practice here at Reconstruct, and this is my colleague Lolly, who is one of our senior consultants. And has got a background in quality assurance and as a regulator also. So whether you're joining from a local authority, an existing care organisation, a private company, a charity, or you're simply exploring the possibility of establishing your own children's service, we genuinely appreciate you being here and hope that you're able to gain some valuable knowledge and information from today. So if we want to go on to slide 2. So if we go straight onto the subject matter, what to know before setting up a children's home. Over the next hour, we're going to explore what it really takes to establish a successful children's residential home, supported accommodation service or education setting in England. So it's not simply about completing an application form or purchasing a property. It isn't even about securing registration. It's very much about building a service that can genuinely improve children's lives while meeting increasingly demanding regulatory expectations. And we'll talk you through that. So the decisions you make before you even submit your registration application will determine whether your service becomes successful or whether it struggles before opening its doors. So throughout today's session, we'll be sharing practical advice drawn from real-life experiences across the sector. We'll discuss common mistakes that delay registrations, and we'll look at why some providers achieve outstanding inspections within a few years, while others receive enforcement action. So we'll also explore financial realities of setting up these provisions, the staffing challenges that come with the sector, property considerations, and leadership expectations that every prospective provider should understand. Most importantly, we'll focus on what inspectors, commissioners and placing authorities are really looking for. So by the end of today's webinar, you will understand more about the different types of children's services that exist, which service might best suit your ambitions, the legal and regulatory framework in England, the registration process as it is currently in 2026, how to select an appropriate property, staffing structures and leadership expectations, and financial planning and sustainability.
However, before we do begin, we'd like everyone to think about one question. Why are you considering opening a children's home? And also, are you in the right local area? One of the reasons for asking the question and for you to think about the question about whether you're in the right local area is the fact that some local authorities are now saying they do not wish any more in children's home opening in their area, and they're also looking at developing their own residential services. So perhaps you're already working within social care. Maybe you have managed a children's home or have been a leader within a school environment for years, and now you want to establish and own your own provision. Perhaps you're an investor, perhaps you have identified a shortage of local placements, or maybe you have seen children repeatedly placed far away from home and believe you could provide better services. Whatever your reason, we encourage you to write it down, because throughout today's session, we want you to keep asking yourself the question, does every decision I'm making bring me closer to providing the best possible outcomes for children? If the answer is yes, you're probably heading in the right direction. Before we discuss regulations, it's important to remind ourselves why this work matters. Across England, thousands of children cannot safely remain with their families. Some have experienced neglect, others have experienced abuse or have witnessed domestic violence. Some have experienced exploitation. Others have experienced multiple placement breakdowns. which presents a difficulty for children in terms of their stability before arriving in residential care. Alongside this, many have missed the formative years of their early education, and many will have been placed in education provisions which are not able to meet their individual education and emotional needs. So with this in mind, we know that our responsibility as operators of children's services is enormous. We aren't simply opening businesses, we are creating safe spaces where children should finally be able to experience safety, understanding, consistency, and where they should be able to thrive and reach their potential. That mindset should underpin every business decision you'll make.
Okay, so if we go on to talk about children's services and why it's so important that you choose the right service for yourself. So one of the biggest mistakes prospective providers make happens, or before they even begin registration, they decide what service they want to open without fully understanding the differences between the various services. And we've seen that with some of the work that we've done. So through our work, we have met many people who tell us what they want to open. They might want to open a children's home, for example. But when we've explored that with them, they've explained that actually they might want to help young people to live more independently. And in which case that would be a supported accommodation, not residential care. Others have told us that they want to educate children, but when we've explored this further, what they've actually wanted is to provide therapeutic support after school, which follows a completely different regulatory pathway. So it's really important that you understand the differences yourselves, as that will save you months of unnecessary work and time. Okay.
Let's begin with residential children's homes. These provide accommodation together with care for children under 18. The key word here is care, and care involves much more than supervision. Staff help children manage their emotions, they administer medication, they attend education meetings, they accompany children to health appointments, they support family contact, they respond to behavioural incidents, they complete safeguarding records, they cook meals, they celebrate birthdays with the children, they comfort children after difficult days. In many ways, residential care staff become the adults children rely upon. The type of children who come to live in residential homes include those children who may have or have experienced trauma, abuse, neglect, exploitation, parental substance misuse, family breakdown, criminal exploitation, county lines involvement, mental health, autism, learning difficulties, complex emotional needs. There's one other category, and those are children who are born specifically within families for the purpose of being abused. No two homes are identical. One home may specialise in autism, another may specialise in emotional and behavioural difficulties. Another may support sibling groups. Your statement of purpose, your operational document that explains to people who you are as a service, should clearly define who your home exists to support. And we're going to use a case study as an example. So let's look at our first example. Sarah wanted to open a 4-bedded children's home. She purchased a beautiful detached property, spent almost 150,000 renovating it. Everything looked perfect, but she overlooked one important question. Could local planning restrictions prevent the intended use? The answer was yes. Planning permission became a lengthy process. Her registration application could not progress until the planning issues were resolved. The property stood empty for nearly 9 months. During that period, she continued paying mortgage, insurance, utilities, council tax, security loan payments, and also payment to the manager, which was also an additional cost. So the delay cost her almost £90,000. Two learning here. The first one is you've got to do your research. That's one of the first things we've got to say to you. You must do your research. The other lesson is never purchase a property before understanding the planning requirements and discussing your proposals with the relevant professionals, because change of use is not always granted. And that's one of the things you've got to do your research about and understand. Something for you to reflect on. Ask yourself, if you purchased a property tomorrow and couldn't open for 9 months, could your business survive financially? This is a question we ask every potential provider to answer honestly.
Okay. So the next section is about supported accommodation. So since regulation was introduced, supported accommodation providers have become an essential part of England's children's services landscape. However, there remains widespread confusion. Supported accommodation is not a smaller version of children's homes. It exists for a completely different purpose. The young people living there are generally aged 16 or 17 and older, and the emphasis is on preparing them for adulthood rather than providing continuous care. So the staff there are expected to be able to teach practical skills such as cooking, budgeting, laundry, managing appointments, applying for employment, accessing education, using public transport, maintaining accommodation, building healthy relationships. This support, again, the key word in this instance is support, should gradually increase independence rather than create dependency. So one of the most common mistakes some supported accommodation providers do make is that they inadvertently deliver care rather than support, which can have significant regulatory implications. So it's really important to understand the differences. So next we're going to go on to understanding the regulatory landscape in 2026. So we've explored the different types of sort of children's services. We're now going to look at what many people consider to be the most daunting part of the journey, the regulatory framework. When we first speak to prospective providers, one of the first questions we hear is, how long does registration take? And
how much will we get for a placement?
The reality is that registration is not simply a process of filling in forms. It is the regulator assessing whether you, your organisation, your leadership team, your property and your systems are capable of providing safe, high quality services for vulnerable children and young people. So the application itself is only one part of the process. The real work starts long before you press submit. So to help you understand that journey, we're going to talk you through who regulates each type of service, the people you must appoint, the documents you'll need, the stages of registration, the most common reasons applications are delayed, and what you should be doing before you even think about applying. So the first principle, it's important that you remember this one thing from today: registration is evidence, not intention. So what do we mean by this? Many applicants tell regulators what they intend to do. So, we will recruit staff, or we'll develop training, we'll introduce supervision, we'll complete audits. Unfortunately, that's not enough. The reality is that regulators don't register intentions, they register evidence. So they want to see the systems that already exist. They want to see policies that already exist. They want to see leadership teams that already exist, governance processes that already exist, training plans that already exist, safeguarding arrangements that already exist, quality assurance that already exists. So the stronger you're able to evidence this, the smoother your registration journey is likely to be. Who regulates children's services? One of the biggest sources of confusion is understanding which regulator is responsible for which type of provision. So we'll simplify this. For children's residential homes, comes under, in England, they're regulated and inspected by Ofsted. So registration here focuses on whether the provider can safely deliver care in accordance with the legal framework for children's homes. For supported accommodation, providers for 16 and 17-year-olds are also subject to regulation and inspection by Ofsted under the supported accommodation framework. Although there are similarities with children's homes, the expectations are different because the service is based on support rather than care, and that distinction is critically important. With education settings, so independent schools, they're regulated under a different legislative framework. Registration involves demonstrating compliance and the relevant standards for independent education before pupils are admitted. So inspections may be undertaken by the appropriate inspectorate depending on the type of school and inspection arrangements in place. If you intend to combine education with residential care, remember that you may have separate regulatory requirements for each aspect of the provision. So one registration does not automatically cover the other.
Understanding the 3 key leadership roles. Let's look at the leadership structure. This is an area where new providers often become confused. There are 3 important roles. Each has different responsibilities. The registered provider is the organisations legally responsible for operating the service. This could be a limited company, a charitable organisation, an individual, another legal entity that meets the relevant requirements. The registered provider is accountable for ensuring that the service complies with the legal and regulatory requirements. The second key individual is the responsible individual. Where the provider is an organisation rather than an individual, there is usually a responsible individual. So think of the responsible individual as the link between the organisation's governance and the day-to-day operation of the service. A strong, responsible individual doesn't simply attend meetings. They understand safeguarding, they understand quality assurance, they understand governance, they ask the difficult questions, they challenge poor practice. Most importantly, they ensure that children's welfare remain the organisation's highest priority. The registered manager. The registered manager is crucial. The registered manager is responsible for leading the service every single day. They create the culture. They lead the team. They oversee safeguarding. They manage incidents. They supervise staff. They engage with families and they liaise with social workers. They prepare for inspection. An excellent registered manager creates an excellent service. A weak registered manager can quickly undermine even the best business plan. So we're going to do a case study. The wrong leadership team. Let's share an example relating to leadership issues. A provider invested more than £500,000 establishing a beautiful residential home. The property was exceptional. The furnishings were outstanding. Policies had been professionally written. Technology systems were excellent. However, during the registration process, it became clear that the proposed registered manager had very limited leadership experience. When questioned about safeguarding scenarios, they struggled to explain how they would respond. They couldn't describe effective supervision. They had little understanding of quality assurance. The application could not progress until the provider demonstrated suitable leadership arrangements. The lesson is simple. The quality of your leadership team matters just as much as the quality of your property. So it is important that this recruitment process is followed diligently, that it is challenging and that it is robust. People often imagine registration is one large event. In reality, you have to consider 4 key areas: the fitness of the premises, the fitness of leadership and management, the fitness of staffing, the fitness of your policies and procedures. In this, it is not the regulator who has to demonstrate your fitness or prove your fitness. It is you who have to demonstrate and evidence you are fit. People often imagine, as I've said before, that registration is one large event. In reality, it is a series of stages. So let's walk through them. Stage 1, develop your vision. Who will you support? What outcomes do you want to achieve? Why does your service exist? Stage 2, you've got to do your research. Understand the legislation. Understand the relevant standards. Understand your local commissioning landscape. Very crucial. Speak with professionals who have experience of establishing services. Stage 3, business planning. This is where many providers rush ahead. Your business plan should include your market analysis, your financial forecasts, your staffing structure, your governance arrangements, risk management, growth strategy, and your exit planning. Stage 4, property selection. Do not just purchase a property simply because it looks attractive. Assess the suitability against the needs of the children you intend to support. Consider accessibility, transport links, outdoor space, fire safety, neighbourhood, schools, healthcare, community resources. Stage 5 relates to your recruitment. Recruit your leadership team early. Involve them in developing your operational systems. A registered manager who helps build the service usually understands it far better than one who's recruited very shortly prior to registration. And stage 6, develop your operational documents. These include your policies, procedures, your children's guide, your risk assessment, your staff handbook, your quality assurance framework, your training program, complaints procedure, whistleblowing arrangements, your business continuity plan, data protection systems, your governance framework. Remember, these documents should reflect how your organization genuinely intends to operate. Avoid copying generic policies without understanding them. Inspectors will quickly identify organizations whose documentation doesn't match the practice or that have been copied. And as I said right at the start, the 4 things you've got to think about: fitness of your premises, fitness of your leadership and management, fitness of your staffing, fitness of your policies, which include your governance arrangements.
So to give you a bit of a practical checklist, before you submit your application, ask yourself these questions. Can I clearly explain why this service is needed? Have I identified my target group? Is my property suitable? Do I understand the relevant regulatory framework? Have I appointed suitable leaders? Have I developed robust safeguarding arrangements? Have I budgeted realistically? Can I evidence quality assurance? Do my policies reflect actual practice? Would I be confident explaining my service to an inspector? If your answer is no to several of these questions, that's not failure. It's simply a sign that more preparation is needed before you apply. And it's better to do that work and to do that prep work rather than put yourself in a situation where you're not going to be able to come across confidently and competently. So talking next about the inspection mindset, we want to leave you with one important thought before we move on to the next slide. So many providers view inspections or inspectors as people who are looking for faults. We encourage you to think differently. Inspectors are asking one central question: can children live here safely? Can they thrive here educationally? Everything else flows from that question. Your leadership, your staffing, your policies, your governance, your premises, your culture, your records, and your decision making. Every piece of evidence should help answer that one question. If your entire organisation is built around children's welfare rather than simply achieving compliance, inspections become conversations about good practice, not exercises in finding paperwork. And that's exactly the kind of organisation every child deserves. So going back to choosing the right property. Now that we understand the regulatory landscape, let's move on to one of the more expensive decisions you'll ever make, choosing the right property. That alongside choosing your leadership team or taking on board your leadership team. As you'll soon see, the right building can make registration significantly easier. The wrong building can delay your plans, increase costs, and create avoidable challenges before you've even welcomed your first child or pupils. We know that in cases that we've sort of worked with people, every business will need a premises. We know that. But in children's services, your building is far more than just a place to work. It's somebody's home or somebody's place to thrive. For many children, it may be the first place they have ever felt safe. That's a huge responsibility for us. Unfortunately, it is also one of the areas where prospective providers make the most expensive mistakes. We've worked with providers who have purchased beautiful properties that simply weren't suitable. We have met with others who signed long leases before speaking to planners. We have also seen providers spend hundreds of thousands of pounds adapting buildings, only to discover that further work was required before they could proceed. So today we want to help you to avoid those mistakes by helping you to understand how to assess a property through the eyes of a regulator, a commissioner, a parent, and most importantly, a child.
So some of the biggest mistakes new providers make, and I will say this right at the start, when you're looking at a property, one of the things that you should be thinking about is, if this was my home and I was looking for a home, will my family be happy here? Will my children thrive here? And how comfortable will it be as a home? Some investors feel that they need to purchase the largest house they can find. 6 bedrooms, large gardens, a detached driveway, beautiful countryside views, perfect for a children's home. Maybe, but not necessarily. A successful children's service isn't determined by the size of the building. It's determined by whether the building supports the needs of the children who will live there, the needs of the children that you're going to be offering a service to. Always, always start with the children. Never start with the property. The question isn't, do I like this building? The real question is, can this building help children achieve positive outcomes? That small change in thinking can save you thousands of pounds. Now, I'd like you to imagine something. Everything is ready for inspection. You have spent months preparing. You need to start thinking like an inspector. The inspector arrives. They smile politely. Then they begin looking around. What are they really assessing? Many new providers assume inspectors are checking cleanliness. Of course, that's important, but they are looking much deeper than that. They're asking questions such as, does this feel like a home? Would I be comfortable placing my own child here if they needed care? Can children feel safe in this environment? Does this layout promote dignity? Can staff supervise effectively? Are risks being managed without making the environment institutional? Everything they observe contributes to an overall picture. The building should communicate warmth, safety, privacy, respect, stability. Remember what we said before, fitness of the premises is being viewed. Location matters. So let's look and talk about location. Again, many providers focus entirely on the building itself, but the surrounding environment is equally important. Think about what children need: access to education, healthcare, public transport, parks, sports facilities, community activities, employment opportunities for older people, older young people, support networks. One of the things you've also got to think about is, what are the local authority facilities and services that will be made available to children? Is there a pressure on that local authority to support its people in terms of what is available in the community? This is why research, you need to do your research. Now think about the opposite. What environmental risks might exist near your property? Busy roads, high crime areas, known exploitation hotspots, poor transport, isolation, lack of services. You've got to do your research. This isn't about making assumptions about communities. It's about understanding the specific needs of the children you intend to support and assessing whether the location enables good outcomes. A property that works exceptionally well for one group of young people may be entirely unsuitable for another. Your assessment should always be thoughtful, evidence-based, and child-centred.
So we have a case study here. We call it the beautiful house that failed. So one of our clients, or it was somebody that came to us following this situation, and purchased a stunning property, 5 bedrooms, large gardens, private driveway, modern kitchen, games room, everything looked perfect. His vision was to create a therapeutic residential home. There was only one problem. The nearest secondary school was almost an hour away. Mental health services required lengthy travel. Public transport was almost non-existent. Recruiting experienced staff proved extremely difficult because of the location. So consequently, young people felt isolated. Family visits became very challenging because of the travel aspect. Commissioners expressed concerns about accessibility. Eventually, occupancy remained low and the client hadn't purchased, he'd not purchased the wrong building, he had chosen the wrong location. So the lessons is simple, really. Never assess a property in isolation, assess the whole community and your intentions for that home. So inside the property, now let's step inside your property. Imagine you have a 12-year-old arriving with a social worker. You've probably had one of the hardest days of your life. You've left everything that was familiar to you behind, and you've walked through the front door of this new home or this new service. What do you notice? Does it feel welcoming? Does it smell clean? Is somebody smiling? Can you immediately see that this is a home rather than an institution? Children often notice small details that adults overlook. So things like photographs, artwork, books, comfortable furniture, natural light, quiet spaces. These are things that matter because they communicate belonging. Next, to create a trauma-informed environment. So we know that many children entering care, as Lonnie mentioned before, has experienced trauma. The physical environment can either reduce anxiety or increase it for them. So it's important that you think carefully about noise levels, privacy, lighting, colour, personal space, opportunities for choice, quiet reflection areas, communal spaces. Bedrooms should feel like a bedroom, so not like temporary accommodation. And children should have the opportunities to personalise their space where appropriate. Remember, it's not simply about compliance. This is about creating somewhere where children can genuinely want to live and where they can safely thrive. So we've got a bit of a due diligence sort of checklist for properties here. So before purchasing or leasing any property, we'd complete a structured due diligence exercise, or we would expect you to do that. So your checklist should include: does the property align with the needs of the children you intend to support? Have you considered local planning requirements and sought professional advice where appropriate? Is the location suitable? Are schools and healthcare services accessible? Can emergency services reach the property easily, which is really important? Is there sufficient parking? Is it adequate outdoor space? Are there appropriate communal areas? Can staff supervise effectively within the home and on the outside of the property? Are there enough bathrooms? Is the property accessible if supporting children with mobility needs? Are utilities and maintenance costs sustainable? Have you budgeted for refurbishment? Have you obtained specialist advice regarding fire safety, health and safety, and building compliance? Never rely solely on the seller's description or the person that's offering you a lease. Carry out your own assessment and seek independent professional advice where required.
So let's go through another case study, starting with the child. Emma, one of our clients, planned to establish a supported accommodation service. Initially, she viewed several large detached houses. Each looked impressive. However, after we reviewed her business model, she realised her young people would need easy access to colleges, employment, shopping facilities, and public transport. With this now in mind, instead of purchasing the largest property, she selected a smaller building within walking distance of local amenities. The results: her young people will have the opportunity to develop independence more quickly, access education easier and more cheaply. Emma didn't choose the biggest property. She chose the property that best reflected the outcome she wanted to achieve. Exactly how successful providers think. Can your business afford to succeed? Now that we've found the right property, it's time to answer the next big question, which is, can your business afford to succeed? We will now briefly explore business planning, financial forecasting, startup costs, occupancy modelling, cash flow, funding strategies, and the financial decisions that separate sustainable providers from those that struggle in their first year. So, building a sustainable children's service.
So we've now reached what we believe is one of the most overlooked aspects of establishing a children's service. When we speak with people who are passionate about making a difference to children, they often tell us about their vision. But in response, there is something we always ask them: how will you ensure that your service is still providing outstanding care 5 years from now? Often at this point, there's a bit of a pause, because excellent care requires more than just good intentions. It requires financial stability, strong leadership, careful planning, effective governance, and a sustainable business model. We understand that some people feel uncomfortable when we use the word business in children's social care. However, we would like to challenge that way of thinking. We would argue that children deserve organisations that are financially secure and they're able to continue for years and years. By being financially unstable, organisations struggle to recruit staff, they struggle to invest in training, they postpone maintenance, they delay improvements, they experience high staff turnover, and because of this, eventually, children experience instability, and that is something that we've seen. A well-managed organisation doesn't exist to maximise profit at the expense of children. It exists to create long-term stability so that children can receive consistent, high-quality care. So today we're going to look at what it really means to build a sustainable organisation, not simply one that opens, but one that thrives. So changing your mindset when you are building an organisation. So let's change your mindset from you building a home or a school. You're building an organisation that has a vision, a culture, a reputation, policies, governance, people, systems, relationships, financial responsibilities, legal responsibilities, and most importantly, children who depend on it. If your organisation depends entirely upon one person doing everything, then it isn't sustainable. Your goal should be to create systems that consistently deliver high quality care, regardless of who is working on that particular shift. So your why. People want to understand why your organisation exists. So we would encourage you to develop a clear purpose, not a marketing slogan, but a genuine purpose. For example, we exist to provide stable, trauma-informed homes where children feel safe, valued, and able to achieve their full potential. Notice that this statement isn't about buildings or profit or occupancy, but it's about children, which is where every successful organisation begins.
Understanding the demand. One of the biggest mistakes providers make in assuming that because there is national demand, and one has to question whether there is a national demand, so that's also part of your research, every service will automatically succeed. That's simply not true. Demand is not evenly distributed. Different local authorities have different commissioning priorities. Different regions have different shortages. Different children have different needs. Before opening your service, ask yourself, who exactly are we supporting? Children with emotional behavioural difficulties, children with learning disabilities, children with autism, sibling groups, parent and child placements, young people preparing for independence. The clearer your answer is, the easier it becomes to design your service. Trying to be everything to everyone, unfortunately, rarely works. Successful providers are clear about their purpose. Let's look at a case study about two providers, provider A and provider B. Both opened children's home within 3 months of each other. Provider A purchased a property because it was available. They hoped local authorities would eventually fill the beds. They hadn't spoken with commissioners. They hadn't researched local needs. After 12 months, occupancy averaged just 1 child. Provider B spent several months speaking with commissioners. They did their research. They reviewed local sufficiency strategies, and you can obtain those by going on the local authority website. They understood placement shortages. They designed their homes specifically around those identified needs. Within weeks of registration, they received referrals. Within 6 months, they were operating close to capacity. What made the difference? Planning and understanding the local need. Looking at market research, one thing we advise is that you do some market research. Many people think market research sounds complicated. It isn't. You should be asking questions such as, how many children's homes already operate within the locality or the nearby areas? What needs remain unmet? What do commissioners say they need? What do inspection reports tell us about existing provisions? Where are children currently being placed? Are children travelling long distances because of placement shortages? Where are specialist services lacking? This information helps shape your business. Evidence should drive decisions, not assumptions.
Okay. So building your business plan. Many people think a business plan exists to satisfy a bank, an investor, or a regulator. Actually, a business plan exists to help you make better decisions. It should become your roadmap. Whenever you face uncertainty, your business plan should remind you why your organisation exists and where it is heading. A strong business plan normally includes an executive summary, your vision and values, market analysis, leadership structure, staffing models, financial forecasts, marketing strategy, risk assessments, governance arrangements, growth plans, quality assurance, business continuity, and exit planning. One mistake we see repeatedly is people downloading generic business plans, and I think Lolly alluded to that before, downloading them from the internet. So what we always advise is please don't. Inspectors and investors can quickly identify documents that don't genuinely reflect your organisation. Your business plan should tell your story. It should explain why your organisation exists, and it should demonstrate that you've thought carefully about every aspect of establishing your service. Authenticity is far more valuable than impressive looking documents, and that's something that we always say to those that we work with.
And just to add to that, one of the things when we talk about fitness of your policies and procedures, when the inspectors are interviewing you, They are looking to match what they're reading to what you're actually saying. And this is how, during an interview, they begin to form assessment and judgments that actually, whilst we see these glossy policies and procedure documents, they don't match what the individual in front of them is actually saying. And that then becomes a problem.
It
as part of
becomes a
registration.
problem about
Yeah.
integrity
Yeah.
and
Honesty.
honesty. Yeah. So that leads us nicely onto vision, values, and culture. So let's talk about this within this section about culture. Culture isn't written in a policy. Culture is experience. So it's reflected in how leaders speak to staff, how staff speak to the children, how mistakes are handled, how success is celebrated, how safeguarding concerns are managed, how complaints are investigated, and how decisions are made. So when inspectors visit your service, they don't simply inspect the paperwork, they experience your culture. And of course, the children experience that on an everyday level. So ask yourself, if somebody walked into your organisation in 3 years' time, what would they say the culture feels like? So next we're talking about recruitment and leadership. This is what we believe to be the single most important factor in determining whether your service succeeds or fails: people. The individuals who the children build their relationships with and that trust with. The quality of your team will shape every child's experience of your service. You can have the most beautiful property, but if the adults working there don't model warmth, consistency, professionalism, and care, the environment will never feel like somewhere a child can thrive. So we've seen, some of the most modest homes with outstanding leaders and dedicated staff achieve remarkable outcomes for children. Leadership setting the culture. We'd like you to think about every workplace you've ever been a part of. I'm sure you can remember one where people were motivated, respected, supported, and proud of what they did. And you can probably equally remember one where morale was low, communication was poor, and staff simply counted down the hours until the end of their shift. What made the difference? In most cases, leadership, where culture starts. Leaders establish expectations, so they influence behaviour. They model professionalism, they create psychological safety, and they set the tone for how the children are treated. Children notice culture far more quickly than adults. They notice how staff speak to one another. They notice whether adults keep promises. They notice whether staff genuinely enjoy coming into work. Culture isn't written in a policy, it's lived every day.
So the three key leadership roles, as I previously mentioned, very successful children's services depends on three key leadership roles. First, the registered provider. This is the organisations legally responsible for the service. Second, the responsible individual. Where required, this person provides oversight on behalf of the organisation, ensuring effective governance, safeguarding oversight, and accountability. And third, the registered manager. This is arguably the most influential role within the service. The registered manager leads the day-to-day operation and creates the culture that children experience every single day. What makes an outstanding registered manager? This is a webinar in itself. We've got to be honest. However, when people ask, what qualifications should a manager have? Qualifications are important. Experience matters. But outstanding registered managers consistently demonstrate something more. They are calm under pressure. They communicate clearly. They take balanced decisions. They lead with integrity. They coach rather than control. They are visible, approachable, reflective, and they never lose sight of why the service exists. They understand that every decision ultimately affects a child. So when recruiting for a manager to help lead your organization, these are the qualities that you should evidence and that you should be looking for. because, as we've said, it's singly the most crucial and important position you're going to have. Due diligence. You've got to make sure you look at their experience, proven track record, good understanding of regulations and of the role and responsibility that comes with this, that they can make decisions, understand what governance is and good leadership is. And importantly, it's do not just look at someone who's been a senior for 5 years and believe that that individual can automatically move up to be a registered manager. This is why it's important to look at their proven track record, read inspection reports if people have managed before. Can't express how important and significant that registered manager's role is, especially if your organisation have a less experienced responsible individual.
Yeah, for those smaller organisations, it can be make or break, can't it?
Yes,
To don't get the right person.
Yeah. So
Okay.
before you leave today, as we have reached the final part of today's webinar, we hope you have gained more understanding around the importance of being prepared and ready for opening your new service. Whether you're at the very beginning of your journey or already developing your first service, we hope you've come to appreciate that opening a children's service isn't just about finding a building. It isn't about completing paperwork. It isn't even about registration, but it is about creating somewhere that children feel safe and they can thrive. Everything we've discussed today support that single objective.
Okay, so just to give you a quick startup sort of checklist, let's remind you of how the beginning of this journey should really look. So define your vision and purpose, research local need, decide on your service model, develop your business plan, secure appropriate funding, identify suitable premises, seek professional advice where appropriate, recruit experienced leaders, develop policies and procedures, build your governance framework, prepare for registration, build relationships with commissioners. A very, very quick guide. There's a lot more to that, obviously, but obviously within this hour, we'll sort of try to summarize that beginning of that journey. We do at Reconstruct offer a service where we can support those who want to start up new services. So if you do have any questions, whether that's about the webinar, whether that's about our services, please do contact us at info@reconstruct.co.uk. Okay, we do have a list of other webinars coming up. The dates are to be confirmed, but we have webinars on various subject matters from visiting advocacy, safeguarding in practice, notice of proposals and notice of decisions, workforce development plans, and we also have some podcasts that are due to be uploaded onto our website soon as well. If there's any questions, there is I should have mentioned right at the beginning, there is a chat function. If you do have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to either put your questions in there or email those in, and we can, when Laura, our colleague, sends out the recordings, she can send out a summary of the answers as well, or our responses to any questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.